Hello, guys, and welcome to CastCast. And today I will be doing 4 game predictions: the Thanksgiving games, and then the Black Friday game between the Bears and the Eagles. But obviously, I'm going to start from the very beginning and just go through them in the order that they'll be played and give my honest opinions. But with that being said, let's get this started. Looking at the Packers visiting Detroit, obviously these two teams met in week 1 in Lambeau, and my Green Bay Packers handled the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions essentially getting one garbage time touchdown and a couple of field goals. That was all that they scored. Kind of wild because kind of similar to this, last game the Packers played where they held the Vikings to 6 points. Obviously minus they didn't give them a garbage time touchdown. But looking at this game, I think it's very interesting that they give the Lions a 3-point odds. And here's the reason for my concerns. We look at the injury report. You have all of their starting linemen are injured in one way or another. Graham Glasgow, the center, has not practiced with, and he has a knee injury. You have Taylor Decker, obviously their left tackle, who has a shoulder injury, has been limited. Tate Ratledge, their right guard, limited as well with a knee. Penei Sewell, they're the best lineman in my opinion, and I don't think it's close just because how good he is. Penei Sewell has an ankle injury and has been limited in practice. And obviously Miles Frazier, their guard, has a knee, but he's been full. But I would say in a way that he's probably their worst lineman. The other thing that you got to consider with the Lions on a short week, and obviously against a divisional opponent, is that they're going up against a team that I can't recall the exact amount of time played total for each game, but the Packers game was a lot shorter than the Lions-Giants game. If you look at the amount of even total time in the game or something, it was, I think the Packers, they were around 200 some minutes played, and then you had Detroit, which obviously went to overtime, and they eked out a win against the Giants. And I will say that they eked out a win against the Giants, because if not for Jahmyr Gibbs, they wouldn't have even been close in that game. And it's wild to say because the Giants were in control of that game for most of the game. And the Lions just did not look very good. And I get that the Packers haven't had the most prolific passing attack, that people would want to see. I personally feel like LaFleur was protecting Jordan Love in the last game, running it a lot, kind of proving that, hey, with Emmanuel Wilson, even without Josh Jacobs, we can run the football. And Emmanuel Wilson had himself a fine game where, you played complementary football, where the Vikings, they didn't have a whole lot of possessions. And even the Packers, they had 3 possessions in the first half, for instance. That's how kind of quick and both teams were running the football. So, I think that the Packers, with how much the Vikings ran the football, not saying it's the same rushing attack that the Lions have, but with a banged up O-line, obviously Jahmyr Gibbs is coming off a heater, a 200, I think, 42-yard game or whatever it is. He's young, obviously, which is a good thing for his recovery time, but we'll see just how well he's able to run it, because I'm sure you've seen the stat of that the Lions, when they've, the Lions have been undefeated, I think, when Jahmyr Gibbs runs over 100 yards. And then the Packers, when they give up over 100 yards, they're obviously looking at the records. They are, they're 0-3-1, I believe. And, the Lions, they are 0-4 when they run less. And obviously week 1, as I recall, the Packers were able to stop Jahmyr Gibbs pretty effectively and, contain him. So looking at this game, I think it's the home field advantage thing, you get 3 points because of that. They're pretty much saying that this game is even. Obviously, I don't think that pertains to here. And most people are siding with the Lions. It is hard to beat a team twice in the same year, but these teams have made it to this point in the season, and the Packers have proven that they are at least going to be in every single game. Even the ones they've lost, like they haven't lost by more than 3 points. And to me, you look at the Lions, the defense worries me. And it's like Hutchinson has been having, a pretty good year, but he's not able to carry the load. And the defensive backs for Detroit just haven't really been inspiring to me. You look at Terrion Arnold, and he's a little banged up. Kirby Joseph, I think it's funny that they say he's questionable here. I think that he's not going to play. He hasn't practiced this week. DJ Reed, a very good free agent signing. He obviously can only guard one guy, and then Amik Robertson, who has been good at times, but he's also been bad at times. It's not like he's a proven guy. And, Brian Branch is obviously you're their best secondary player, in my opinion. But looking at this game, obviously the major difference between this and week one was Aleem McNeil is playing. And I think that Marcus Davenport, I think that they've put him on the injury report. I think that they could activate him for this game. I don't know if he plays, but Al-Quadin Muhammad is a somewhat serviceable backup that, has flares. But I do expect this game to be kind of, a lot more grit than week one, I guess. People will say that week one is one of those weeks that, like, hey, you kind of, omit because it's the first regular and full game of the season. Who knows what can happen? But I do think that the Packers just overall have every reason to kind of go out and sweep this team who swept them last year. And, looking at, I guess, and I totally just close it. Looking at the Packers injuries, there's really nobody that's like hurt that I'm kind of like, oh, they're not gonna play. We have yet to hear word at the time of me recording this on whether or not Jaden Reed is going to be activated. He has practiced, but we don't know whether he's going to be activated. Matthew Golden could also play, obviously dealing with his injury. Wicks has been dealing with an injury, but he played last week, making a few crucial catches. And Savion Williams has, been in a walking boot and that sort of thing. But I overall think that with Watson, Dobbs, and whether it's Golden, Wicks, Malik Heath, I do think that this team has continued to get better, and the O-line has looked better over the last few weeks. I know it hasn't been like, oh, they've been running it all over people, but they've been running it more effectively, protecting Jordan Love, and he's been making throws when he's needed to with no injury designation. But looking at this team, I mean, you have, Quay Walker, who could play, who didn't play last week, but Isaiah McDuffie, Keyshawn Nixon might not be a go, but I overall think that, Valentine has been playing very well, and Bullard has been playing very well. And even Kamal Haddon, who came in last week, looked very, very good for not having played like any snaps prior to that. And we both know the safeties. So I am saying that I think that my Packers are going to win this game. I don't know if they'll score a lot just because it doesn't seem like the Packers style. But I am going to say that my Packers win this game. They get the sweep on the Lions, who just haven't played the most inspiring football lately outside of Jahmyr Gibbs. And Jahmyr Gibbs has obviously been playing with that flair, doing very, very well. And, I do always think that he's a home run waiting to happen with his speed, but the Packers know him and they're very familiar with him. And I think that, they're going to be able to prevent the big runs because the Giants haven't had a good run defense all year for whatever reason. They just fired their DC. So overall, I think that the Lions are walking into a game where they're playing a much better opponent than the Giants, and the Giants, nearly beat the Lions last week. So I'm going with the Packers And now we'll move on to Chiefs Cowboys. This game to me is very pivotal. Don't mind these headlines here. I think it's weird how Stephen A, did say that Chiefs game a must win for Cowboys. I mean, you look at this, and I mean, you do kind of look at their division with the Cowboys. Obviously, they are the sole team that could potentially catch up with Philadelphia. Obviously, they split the series with them, after last week. So that's not really coming into contention, but who knows whether Philadelphia will drop some games because of all the, drama that they, that's going on around them. But the Chiefs to me, if you lose this game against the Cowboys, which I do think that there's a decent shot for them, for them to lose, if I'm being honest with you, but you've really got to kind of win this. They play the Chargers again. They play Denver again. I don't see them winning this division unless Denver somehow has a collapse, type end of the season, which I just don't see in with their defense. But I think it's kind of interesting that they got this big of a percentage. I mean, they are only 3.5 point, favorites in this game. And it's interesting because you look at the Cowboys, and they bolstered up their D-line. Guys are coming back on Dallas, or that have come back. You look at, I look at Overshown. He's come back and he has proven that he is a difference changer, and that he's added more of a dynamic to this team, and his ability to rush. And even Jadeveon Clowney has looked pretty good last week, chasing out Hurts and that sort of thing, and that sort of thing. And overall, I guess I'm not sure, Adigizua even played pretty well. I find it odd that they actually moved Kenny Clark back, but Adigizua has had an impact, and they have a rotational D-line now where, a plethora of guys can rush. I'm not saying any of them are crazy prolific, but they can get production that way to, account for their lack of corner and safety play, in all honesty. So, and looking at this, I just think that also with Trey Smith being injured and likely, they have said that he's out of this game, and Noah Gray, not a huge, I would say a huge loss, but he's a reliable target for them. Not good. And I guess, Roland Wallace here out. You need all your DBs, to play against this team, obviously with Lamb and Pickens. And overall, I think that it's going to be kind of an uphill battle for the Chiefs. I don't understand why they're favorites by so much. They're only, they're one win ahead of Dallas, and Dallas is at home. Not that they've played, the best, but they actually have at least a little bit of a run game. So contrary to what this says, I'm actually going with the Cowboys to win this game. I overall don't think that the Chiefs have a super solid chance to win this game, unless Mahomes has some Thanksgiving magic. But the team is pretty banged up. Trey Smith not being in, it's huge. But yeah, I just think that Dallas, especially if their defense, started coming alive and they have kind of their method now, they're going to be looking like a far better team from this point onward. If they have a little bit more of a pass rush, which, you did see last week. So I'm going with Dallas in this game, and I don't fully believe that they should be an underdog. Moving on to the night game, we have Bengals-Ravens. Now, I do believe that Burrow starts this game. The interesting thing is with this division is that you got Cincinnati at 3-8. It's a stretch to make the playoffs, but they do play 2 games still against Baltimore. And, Pittsburgh, they've obviously split, but who knows if Pittsburgh is going to keep on losing and be one of those teams that, they're fringe, this year, because they've been so up and down that it's, to me, I mean, they could still win the division, but do we fully believe in Pittsburgh? And that's me saying as a Rodgers fan, and they just, you kind of know what their ceiling is at this point. Cincinnati, I mean, we obviously haven't seen Burrow, but Burrow is Burrow. And while Higgins is likely out with concussion protocol because it's a short week, obviously, I think that Cincinnati can give Baltimore a run for their money. I know it's in MNT, but you look at, Burrow and Chase, and these guys just get it done. And Chase has cooked Baltimore, in the past. He's cooked like practically everyone in this division. I think it's hard to say that he hasn't cooked most people. I do understand Trey Hendrickson is out, to contain Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson has been hurt, and he hasn't been himself. I will say that Baltimore is a very healthy team. The only guys here that I'm kind of like, it would be bad if these guys miss time is Kyle Hamilton and then Rashad Bateman. Justice Hill is nice, but I think that, the backup to Henry, the rookie, I forget his name, has done a good job when he's gotten playing time and gotten the ball. But looking at this game, I mean, this you could be 6-6 as Baltimore, and then 4-8 as Cincinnati. Obviously, you think you have to win out, but to me, with Cincinnati, Burrow just, he comes back and he's going to be throwing heaters. I just see it. So don't ask me why, but I'm going with the underdog again. I think that 7 is too steep for Baltimore. I think it's ridiculous. And, I remember last year that they had so many touchdowns, these two teams, when they played each other. And obviously these are far different circumstances, but you look at Cincinnati and I think that they could surprise. And with Burrow coming back, maybe that makes up room for Chase Brown, who obviously hasn't had the rushing, yards that, you'd think that they would have had this year, but not having a passing attack and not having the threat of, deep balls and that sort of thing. And, the accuracy of Joe Burrow will affect your running game. So I am going with Cincinnati because I think that, hey, they realize that this division is crazy shaky this year for whatever reason, and they can make a statement by winning in primetime on Thanksgiving in Baltimore. Moving on to Bears visiting the Eagles. Obviously, this is in the Eagles Stadium. They favor the Eagles by 7. Don't ask me why, because these guys, they obviously had a collapse on Sunday. I think that the Eagles, their fragility and all that just really showed. And the thing that I think about with this game is, I guess, looking at the Bears, is the way they addressed the O-line in the offseason. Caleb Williams, I haven't checked lately, but he was leading the league with time to pass like earlier in the year. And I do think that their O-line was much improved with, Dahlman, Tooney, and Jonah Jackson. Obviously, you still have problems on your tackles with Theo Benedette and Darnell Wright. That does worry me a little bit, but you think about the guys that are going to have to go up against Jalen Carter is the strength of your O-line. And then you look at kind of who's been good on this team, and it's like the outside wide receivers and then tight end. And I just overall think, looking at this team, that they've been not sound entirely. I do think the defense has struggled. You do get back. You do have Jalen Jones coming back. I think it's interesting that he's actually still listed behind Tyreek Stevenson. And then you have, where's their other guy? Kyler Gordon, who they say is coming back. They haven't activated him off IR. I'm sure it's a smokescreen. We'll know prior to game time or something like that. They might play mind games and that sort of thing. But CJ Gardner-Johnson has played well. The safety play to me has been kind of subpar. I mean, the whole secondary, I guess, has been subpar, but they've been waiting for Jalen Johnson. I don't know why I said Jalen Jones. Okay, that totally threw me. But both of these guys are expected to play, Gordon and Johnson. But I guess they haven't activated them yet, which they can obviously wait on. So you look at, Nahshon Wright hasn't been good. I mean, their secondary has not been good. Now, the thing that I will say is that I don't think it's going to be as easy as you come back in and you play up to the level you played before. Because Gordon played at a sneaky high level where a lot of people still don't really know about him, I feel like. They extended him because of, his really good play from the nickel. And obviously, I mean, Jalen Johnson is, their best corner, or was. I don't hope that he comes back as a Packer fan the way he was, because he was pretty good, and he would contest a lot of catches, but overall it should help a little bit. But yeah, I always wonder, with the lack of practice, with the injury, whether or not these guys are going to come back 100% and that type of thing. But they need them to come back. So would they rush them? I don't know. It's obviously, why can't I remember his name now? Their head coach's first year of coaching. So what will they do? But overall, I'm looking at this game, and I hate to say it, but I overall think that the Bears can win this game. And obviously, we haven't talked about injuries. Lane Johnson's still out, obviously, and they haven't had a good record when he's been out, obviously, over his long career. You look at all these other guys. Adoree Jackson, I don't think that they'll really miss him. I think that Michael Carter coming in was a good thing. Adoree Jackson has, been their worst corner. Obviously, you have... why can't I remember anyone's name? Cooper DeJean and then Terrion Arnold, who are their two best corners, obviously. Or Quinyon Mitchell. Sorry, Terrion Arnold is a Lion. But in any case, you kind of look at this team. Barkley's been dealing with an injury. Devonta Smith has a slight injury. I don't think it really matters. Landon Dickerson has been... kind of beat up. Obviously, you have, Cam Jurgens, and Mailata are your best linemen in this case. Tyler Steens, just hasn't been as good as Becton was last year. I just think overall their O-line hasn't been, the most insane. But obviously, you look at the guys they have to stop on defense. I do think that Jalen Phillips is going to have a big game here because, not that Jalen Carter still can't have an effect, but he's going up an interior that is, pretty good interior of the O-line. And then it's, Jordan Davis maybe bats some balls down, but obviously Caleb Williams is a taller guy. And overall, I think the Bears just have a decent running game. So despite the Bears, not being favored in this game, I'm going with them as well. And, it's so strange that I'm predicting the away team for all of these guys. For all of these games that are, on Thursday and then the one on Friday. I did not mean to do that on purpose, but I do think that it's weird that, and I get it that Chicago has only beat one winning team, and that was Pittsburgh on Sunday, and that was a close game against a backup, but Philadelphia really hasn't been convincing to me. They haven't. And it's something to be said that I'm a Packer fan, and I'm picking the Bears, because I just, their team has been functioning better than Philadelphia, in my opinion. At least offensively. And I think they have enough on defense, depending on who comes back, to play well. And it's like, I don't know, Philadelphia's defense has been abysmal. That's why they gave up 3 scores to the Cowboys. I get it, it's the Cowboys. They have a better wide receiver room than the Bears, I guess, with their top 2 at least. But the Bears, and here's the nuts thing. Ben Johnson, there's the coach's name. Ben Johnson smoked the Cowboys last year, and he they were kind of dominant against, some of these NFC East teams, besides, I guess, the Commanders. But overall, I think that, they're on a mission, and they can really make a statement win today by saying, hey, we're not going to have a losing record this week and go to 9-3. Prior to our game against the Packers the following week, which should be a huge game. But tell me I'm crazy. I guess, maybe I am, but yeah, I'm picking the Bears. As much as I would like to see them lose. But that's going to do it for this one, you guys. I think that, we do have some pretty good games over a 2-game span, a 2-day span. And, comment what you think's going to happen, or whether you think any of my points are valid, or what your own opinions are. But as always, I am Casty Streeter, and this is CastCast. And to conclude, go Pack Go.